I call Larissa Wall.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in the committee stages of the Environment Protection Authority Bill. Labor opposes this bill and we will do so vigorously, and I'll tell you why. We voted for the first reading because we believe in democracy. Democracy is about letting communities, letting local people have a say in interests that are going to affect their lives. So our opposition is because we listened, and we want to highlight the following rationale for our opposition. In the explanatory note, it is stated that the EPA arose from a decision to remove political interference. Well, that's a complete joke. As we all know, the Minister will have more influence, not less, and the EPA, which he will appoint, will advise and make recommendations to the Minister regarding how the Minister can use call-in powers that circumvents the Environment Court processes. Now, how is that going to help and ensure that local communities have a say? To provide a formal ministerial mechanism to fast-track projects that actually circumvents democracy is absolutely appalling, and this side of the House wants to reiterate that for us we think it's vital that local people, mum and dad New Zealander, have an opportunity to have a say in developments that are happening in their communities. They do. They won't have a say in their communities because you'll veto them. That's the reality. There is no correlation in objectives and functions between the EPA and the RMA, which under this body plays a significant role, as you know, Minister. Why not? Again, for you, it is all about mimicking and minimising the voices of local people. Again, that's right. We want and need the EPA and Environment Protection Authority to actually have functions that say they're going to actually protect the environment. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to have a title of a bill, an Environment Protection Authority, that is actually not even going to protect the environment. How ridiculous. And of course it comes from that side of the House, because those Tories over there actually don't care about communities, about local people having a say. Otherwise you wouldn't put processes like this that actually minimise New Zealanders, mum and dad New Zealander, from having a say in developments that are going to affect their lives. You don't care. This is for you. Order. It's all about big business. Yeah. Sorry, Mr Chair.
Just remember, just sit while I'm standing. I know the member is learning on these occasions, but whenever you say you, it refers to the presiding officer at the time, and so you cannot use the word you. You use the word the members or member, but not the word you. Larissa Wall.
My apologies again, Mr Chair. The opposition, I will refer to them because that's who I'm talking about. The opposition. No, our opposition, which is you. Our opposition, which is you. The third reason I want to highlight is that who are those voices? Who are those voices that the Tories want to minimise and silence? Well, of course, they're Māoris, aren't they? They're Māori voices that you don't want to let have a formal opportunity to participate in these decision-making processes. Whānau Apanu is the most recent example, and Hekia might laugh over there, but Hekia, I don't think your whānau are laughing with you, unfortunately, for you. It would not surprise anyone that it is Māori, and Labour will oppose this. Labour vigorously opposes the fact there is not a treaty clause in this bill. So I want to compliment the colleague on my side of the House, the Honourable Charles Chevelle, for the supplementary order paper. And I also want to say the Māori Party have been happy, and it's wonderful to see that they do have an SOP, but we do actually have to question why it's taken them so long. As we know, a Māori advisory group is only going to be paying lip service, and it's not mana enhancing. It certainly doesn't enhance the mana of hapu and iwi. The reality is that the Māori Advisory Group might be able to contribute to the decision-making, but Rahui will know that if they have something to say, there's actually no requirement of the EPA to listen to them. Now, isn't that really interesting? We're going to have a Māori advisory group that actually might want to say things about different issues, but the EPA don't have to listen to them. So that's what we're used to, and that's why we think we need a treaty clause to make sure that when Māori say something, they're listened to, that Māori should be consulted with and actually listened to. Yeah, exactly. And I expect this from National, I must say. Apps and apps, of course, but I don't expect it from the Māori Party. So it's good to finally see them put an SOP that will ensure that there's a treaty clause in this piece of legislation. It used to be a minimum, actually, and Tariana will know that she has fought hard over the years to make sure...
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Chairman, I want to make a brief contribution to some of the points that have been made in the debate. Let me go through them. The last speaker, Louise Wall, claimed this bill has... Louisa... claimed that this bill has a veto power for the minister. Well, I simply ask her, which clause? Where? There is no veto. In fact, it's very interesting. The only power that existed for a minister to veto a decision under the Resource Management Act was Chris Carter when he vetoed the decision on the Whangamata Marina. It was a national government that repealed that provision because we, on our side of the House, want environmental processes with integrity. In fact, there is no power in this bill for any ministerial veto over decisions. And I make a further point, and that is she claimed that there was provisions in this bill to cut out the right of communities for iwi and hapu to have a decision. Again, I challenge her, which clause? No such clause exists in this part or this bill, and I simply say this Parliament deserves better than those sorts of nonsense contributions that have got no reflection of the bill before the House. I want to acknowledge the enormous contribution that the Māori Party has made to this bill. In the early stages, Peter Sharples and the Māori Party made very strong submissions that they wanted these powers to be considered in an autonomous agency. And that is exactly what we have done. There was an alternative point of view that was put forward by officials, and the National Party, closely working with the Māori Party, agreed, and that is what is provided for. Now, Rahui Kātane has tabled an amendment, an SOP, on this bill that provides for a treaty clause, and the government will be supporting that provision. Can I say it is a complex issue, and let me explain to the House why. The principal aspect of the EPA is actually picking up administrative functions in the Resource Management Act, in the Hazardous Substances Act, in the Ozone Protection Act, in the Climate Change Act. And what we don't want to provide is legal confusion on a whole lot of sets of decision making. And what Rahui Kātane has done, in my view very wisely, with her amendment, is not to change the respective treaty provisions in each of those acts, but to make plain that the EPA has those responsibilities. In my view, that's quite sound. Now, Charles Chauvel raised a very proper point in his contribution, and that was, should not the EPA have a role around managing regulatory functions in the exclusive economic zone? And I don't think there's a member in this House that sat back and looked at the disaster that unfolded in the Gulf of Mexico and said that needs to be addressed. We need to make sure that we've got world best practice in New Zealand about dealing with those sorts of risks. Let me say exactly what the government has done. We had done substantive work around providing a regulatory environment for the exclusive economic zone when that disaster occurred. And myself and the Minister of Energy and Resources said, hang on a moment, the work that was done on that was before that disaster. We need to kick the tyres and make damn sure that we are getting the regulatory provisions right for it. So we sought an independent report. That independent report was provided to government late last year, and officials have been working on a substantive bill. Of course, this bill was introduced before that work was done, and it is our view that we need to do that very robustly. It is my intention as Minister for the Environment to introduce a bill into the House this year that will provide for the proper role for the EPA in regulating environmental effects in the exclusive economic zone. I look forward to the support of that House for what is an incredibly important piece of work, given the fact that we note that that ocean area is 16 times our land area. It is this government's view that we want to be able to utilise the resources in that space, but equally so that we do so in a responsible way. The last point I wish to make is about some of the views around the functions, and the Green Party and a number of others have cried foul and said, why don't we have a set of high-level, broad environmental principles that apply for the EPA? Let me explain to the House exactly why that would be an unnecessary and a bad thing to do. It is because we have, under the Resource Management Act, very long debated principles of sustainable management. And Charles will know that there's been long debates in the courts around defining what that is for the 50,000 resource consents that come per year before resource consenting decisions. Equally so, there's a different provision under the Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act. There's another one, Mr Chairman. Sorry, Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Chairman, there's another provision in respect of the Climate Change Act. There's a further provision under the Ozone Protection Act. Now, if you started putting in the sorts of provisions that the Greens or others propose, and you're you're making a decision about ozone protection or resource management or climate change or any of those, are you to apply the principles in the base act that this Parliament has agreed to, or are you to apply the principles that you have in the EPA legislation? That would create a legal nonsense. That would not work. And so I just simply ask the Green Party and the Labour Party to reflect on their rhetoric and to think in a thoughtful way about how we can indeed provide the EPA with clear instructions about how they administer these very important acts.
Call David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm pleased to take an initial call on this committee stage of the purpose of the bill